Hello, everyone. Welcome to this program brought to you by Kensington and Chelsea Libraries. Tonight, our guest is Olga Cuckovic, a great friend and a licensed tour guide of Rome and Vatican City, who has managed tours in Italy, Central Europe, and Croatia and Bosnia for over 30 years, working for some of the best US operators for luxury travel. But she started working as a guide at the age of 18 in her hometown of Dubrovnik, which is the theme of our event tonight. Olga is a lover of art. She's obtained her master's degree in arts management at the American University of Rome last year and is very proud of her TEFL certificate as well. But I am incredibly happy to host this event tonight, particularly on a personal note, because it is about the place that I love most of all the places in the world. It's an old medieval city in which I've spent all of my childhood summers. So I'm very, very excited to introduce to you the one person who can do this beautiful city, the gem of the Adriatic, who can do it justice, and that is my beautiful friend, Olga Cuckovic.
Oh, hello, everyone. Good evening, Nina. Good evening, all of you who are watching us tonight. And yes, as Nina mentioned, tonight it's like going back to our first love for both Nina and I. So let's start from somewhere. This is the famous panorama of Dubrovnik, and we call this presentation the Jewel of the Adriatic. It is a sort of a paraphrasing of what Lord Byron called the city of Dubrovnik, the Pearl of the Adriatic. And as you can tell, it really is a gorgeous, gorgeous city. We're looking at the old harbor, and to the left there is a big fortress of St. John, which today houses the Maritime Museum. We see other fortresses as well. If you look at the backdrop, now I'm showing with my cursor, there is the fortress of St. Lawrence, or Lovrenac, as it is called locally, which has been the stage for theatre performances for decades. There's Dubrovnik Festival, Dubrovnik Summer Festival, takes place in July and August, and famously Hamlet, Shakespeare plays frequently would take place at the fortress. We'll get there. We'll get around the city a little close up now to see a little better all the things we're going to cover, or at least try to cover. There's so much for a lifetime, actually. So let's start with the map of Croatia, just as an introduction, with the traditional coat of arms and the traditional colors. And with respect to the rest of Europe, you see the position of Croatia. I'm sure you're all familiar with that, but just to remind ourselves of this amazing position that this boomerang-shaped country has, with continental climate in the north, where there is the capital, Zagreb, and then the coast in the Mediterranean, beautifully diverse coast with myriads of islands. They say about 1,000, and 66 are inhabited, and they're beautiful, beautiful beaches. Mainly rocky, but there are also pebble beaches and a few, but also sand beaches. Croatia has become a top destination for the beach tourism recently. And what is marked in red is the territory of what used to be the so-called Republic of Ragusa, or Dubrovnik. Today, Dubrovnik is a Slavic name that appears already around the 12th century, 13th century, comes from a Slavic word for an oak forest, dub, and traditional old name was Ragusa. So this is a lovely aerial view. We see the city walls, one of the best preserved in the world, some say even the second after the wall of China of that length, which is approximately 2 kilometers, slightly less. And we see how the city of Dubrovnik invested into what was not just a defense, but it was also a sort of a statement, because we must consider that for hundreds of years, this lovely city was a sort of an independent city-state republic, usually under powerful protectors, starting with the Byzantines in the 9th, 10th century, then Venetians. After the Venetians, after the 14th century, it comes under the protection or suzerainty of the Hungarian kings, and then it was paying tributes to the Turks. It was basically juggling in between all these big powers in the Mediterranean. It was too small to become a power itself, so it had to play the card of diplomacy, and it managed wonderfully. It had 80 consulates around the world after the 1800s, and the end comes with the French occupation. 1808, the abolishing of the Republic of Dubrovnik, which then starts making part of the Hungarian Austrian possessions in what we call Dalmatia, the part of Croatia, and later the Kingdom of Yugoslavia and the Yugoslavian state. The Republic of Yugoslavia. You have all heard about the Croatian War of Independence. The city was badly attacked, under siege in 91 and 92, but then in 92, Croatia was recognized as an independent state, and Dubrovnik got back to the tourism trade, and look how beautiful it is. No wonder all these tourists hopefully will come back soon. Croatia had about 20 million tourists in 2019, and Dubrovnik itself more than 1 million, and mainly cruise ships, but also the hotels and private apartments, rooms, myriads of hotels, so a lot of possibilities to find the accommodation of your liking in the city of Dubrovnik. And to remind us of the glorious past of the city, here is the map that represented Dubrovnik as it was before the big earthquake in 1667 that killed about 1/3 of the population. The basic shape at the first sight remains the same, but a lot of buildings have changed. I'm going to point out here with the cursor the main street, and then towards the end, towards the harbor, there are some buildings that you see them completely different. Later on you will see how completely different they look like. And the harbor is there, the breakwater, the building to the right, several identical roofs, those are the lazzaretti, or the quarantine. The quarantine were due to the contagious diseases. The passengers coming from potentially dangerous areas had to spend 40 days, and the Italian word 40, 40 is in the origin of the word quarantine. Some say it was the oldest one in Europe. Maybe Venice, maybe Dubrovnik. We like to believe it was Dubrovnik. And now we have to enter the city, start from somewhere. Here is the big fortress called Mincheta, and we are approaching the Pile Gate. The Pile Gate with the statue on top, which is the statue of Saint Blaise, the patron saint of the city. You see the flag of Saint Blaise, and I'm going to get closer to him. He's holding the city of Dubrovnik in his little hand. There he is. He's been protecting the city for 1,000 years, they say. He became the patron saint in the 11th century, and that was because they say he appeared in a dream of a Franciscan monk announcing that the enemy ships, the Venetians, were coming. So he's the patron saint of the diseases of the throat. So on the 2nd of February, we can all go to the Church of St. Blaise and get the blessing of the throat. And Libertas is the flag of Dubrovnik, meaning freedom. Dubrovnik has always appreciated its freedom more than anything else, and its hymn goes back to its 18th century poet Gundulic, oh sweet, oh precious, oh 17th century, sorry, oh sweet, oh precious, or beautiful freedom. And the motto of Dubrovnik was also liberty is not sold for any gold in the world. So Libertas is the flag of the city. And as we enter the old city through the Pillar Gate, there's this lovely lady in the traditional costume from the area of Konavle, which is east of Dubrovnik, and she's selling these souvenirs with the panoramic picture of Dubrovnik on the magnet, fridge magnet. And what I wanted to point out was not just typical souvenirs, the lavender and the pictures of the old city, but also this mark at the top that says 15 KN. Well, that's the local currency, that's kuna, because Dubrovnik is the part of the European community since 2013, but it still is not in the Schengen, and it still doesn't have euro, but it's getting there. It should have been done this year or maybe next year. We'll see. And now we are on the main street, on Stradone, as Venetians called it. Venetians were mocking Dubrovnik a little bit. Stradone would be like the big ugly street, but actually it's one of the most beautiful streets in the world, we believe. And I see at the far end there is the bell tower, which we're going to talk about, and to the right is the fountain, Onofrio's fountain. Onofrio della Cava was an Italian architect who built the aqueduct in the 15th century that brought fresh water to the fountains of the city. It was badly needed, not for hygiene only, but also for the textile industry that Dubrovnik had. And it had a beautiful dome in the Gothic and Renaissance flourish Gothic style, but it was damaged and gone in that big earthquake in 1667. Now, to the left, you can see a church, Saint Saviour, which survives the earthquake. And it was built in 1520 after a smaller earthquake. It saved the city, and there it is. After this entrance to the main street, we will enter the Franciscan monastery. Franciscan church is here with the bell tower here immediately to the left. And here I would like to see how it looks like an aerial view from the city walls, the fountain of Onofrio, the main street, and the bell towers of the Franciscan monastery, and the main bell tower at the far end towards the harbor. Now inside the Franciscan monastery, we see the Franciscans came to Dubrovnik already in the 13th century, but the monastery inside the city wall was built a bit later, so we are here in the 1300s. And there are the frescoes on the walls showing us the scenes from life of Saint Francis, who, according to the legend, stopped in Dubrovnik on his way to the Middle East. And you see the beautiful Romanesque Gothic style. The top floor, the upper cloister, is Renaissance, and here we see again that famous Dubrovnik before the earthquake, and Saint Francis receiving stigmatas at the Mount Laverna. Now, the Franciscan monastery is also known for these little bestiary. They call this the medieval family figures, but there is a lovely little legend about this one. It seems that the sculptor Miho Brajkov had a bad toothache, so his right cheek was swollen, so he carved himself on that capital, they say. And another thing that Franciscan monastery is actually mainly famous for is the pharmacy. The pharmacy, founded in 1317, which makes it one of the oldest and especially still functioning pharmacies. This is the museum. There's a modern pharmacy at the entrance. And inside the museum, it's not only about the pharmacy, but also about beautiful ex voto gifts. This kind of jewelry is typical for the Dubrovnik area, and I know that, well, I hope that many ladies will wonder, oh my God, where can I get that? Well, we'll get to that. Just to stay tuned. Obviously, difficult to find these old pieces, but modern goldsmiths and filigree shops, they make them. And there are also many reliquaries with the bones of the saints. You see, like, for example, here, St. Lawrence, the piece of the bone can be seen through a little opening. There are plenty of these relics in the monasteries and the treasuries of Dubrovnik, the Catholic churches. And the only part of the Church of St. Francis that remains undamaged in 1667 is this Pietà. Goes back to 1498, so just a few years after Michelangelo's Pietà, which in art stands for Mary with the Dead Jesus, and this is our local Pietà, same period. So relatively similar, if we can say, we dare say. And inside the church, there's plenty of beautiful Baroque, but also in combination with modern. This is 1900s, a local painter, Ivo Dulcic, a beautiful mosaic. Now, across the street from the Franciscan monastery, there's this peculiar little window that was the orphanage, where there was sort of two wheel-like devices where people could bring, usually illegitimate babies and safely put them on the wheel so they would end up inside. And according to Dubrovnik law, nobody was allowed to stop and investigate a person who would normally walk hooded with the hood and carrying a baby to take it safely to the orphanage, where 5 years later these children were given up for the adoption. Dubrovnik Republic had a lot of humanitarian initiatives, and for example, people were entitled to free medical care. There was a city doctor, and even the ladies of the night, when they grew older, they would be married by the state to a complacent gentleman. And they really try to avoid that anyone becomes a burden on society. And another little curiosity, we could call these nooks and crannies. You see, there's something carved on the wall. It's the church called Saint Roch. And this goes back to the 1500s. What it literally says, Pax vobis memento mori, peace on you, for you are mortal. But it really also says those of you who are playing the ball. It seems that young people were playing some kind of a soccer, something in between tennis and today's soccer, and disturbing the afternoon nap of friars who lived nearby. Now, walking through Dubrovnik, this is a street called Prijeko, filled with the restaurants. It's parallel with the main street, and there are a lot of these little narrow alleys, but you see it's all city planning because they're all straight and they allow for the breeze to flow, and every building was strictly regulated, the width, the height, and the kitchens always at the top to avoid the fires destroying the whole building, because most frequently they would start in the kitchens. Well, people live in the old city. There were about, 5,000 until the war in 91, and then slowly it's down to approximately 1,000 people living in the old city. Altogether, Dubrovnik has about 40,000 inhabitants, and a lot of these buildings have become the rental spaces or the summer homes of people who have invested well. Now, more monasteries. Today, a brief visit to the Dominican monastery. Both Dominicans and Franciscans came to Dubrovnik in the 13th century Franciscans were mainly pharmacists, Dominicans were preachers. That's a bit simplified, but let's say just a general idea. And this is a beautiful, flourishing Gothic style. And Dominican monastery also has a lovely museum. They also have a Titian or so, but I wanted to mention more of Dubrovnik art. There was a school with local painters, Gothic Renaissance, late Gothic, early Renaissance. We are talking about late 1400s, early 1500s, and Božidarević, Dobričević, Hamzić. I don't expect anyone to remember, but if you come to Dubrovnik, we may get back to that. And local people liked to be represented because they donated or commissioned the artist to paint these usually altarpieces. The monastery also has a precious relic who nobody really knows how it came to Dubrovnik, at least I couldn't find out. The head of Saint Stephen, not the first martyr, but the King of Hungary. So we're talking about 11th century saint who was canonized very soon after his death. Now, more ex voto gifts. I wanted to show you these beautiful pieces. They're either given to the church for the grace received or as a prayer. So many of these have regarded some health problems. You see the eyes or an arm or the belly, or generally for a person. You see these pious ladies praying the rosary. The ladies of Dubrovnik had to follow very strict rules, and there are little love stories about the maximum that a young man could hope for before marriage was that a young lady threw on him a little egg made of wax and resin that was filled with perfumes, and then they would kiss those broken eggs. Now, in the monastery, we have more of the religious artifacts. These are the reliquaries with the tiny pieces of the bones or whatever belong to a saint. They are really beautifully made. Here is a Blessed Mother, always venerated in a very religious and traditional Roman Catholic city of Dubrovnik. Now, when we have absorbed a lot of the art and history, we can go to the market. This was a bit late, but less goodies than you would find earlier in the morning. This is not the main market of the city, of course. In the modern Dubrovnik, in the harbor of Gruž, there is a big market. But here I must advise that you should come before 12, because at 12 o'clock there's the traditional feeding of the pigeons. It's kind of fun. They wait on the roofs. They just know it's been decades that they've been fed with corn grain every day at 12 o'clock. And there's also like the oyster bar, and where you see these chairs with white and blue stripes. Then there is a 5-star hotel in one of these old buildings, and during the summer festival, this piazza becomes also the theater stage. So very versatile. The market closes around 1 o'clock, but this is if you're going to the beach. This is where you come to pick up some fresh figs and grapes, some fresh fruit, or even some dry figs to take home, or the orange peel or roasted almonds, something to munch on later during the day. And what you can do with fresh figs, in late morning, the best thing to do is have a little glass of grappa, especially if it's travarica with the herbs. This is a cafe that we all love very much, one of the oldest ones in Dubrovnik. Luci is the owner. Just remember the light, Lucia, Luci, Libertina is the official name. And there are all these local painters who have contributed in decades. Nothing has changed at Luci's since we were young. We just love this place, and the owner was a member of this band called the Troubadours. They became famous in 1969. They entered the Eurovision song contest on behalf of Yugoslavia back then. And now back to the main street after we have refreshed ourselves with a bit of grappa or coffee and figs. There we are at the main street, at the bell tower and the church of Saint Blaise, the patron saint. Inside the bell tower, there are these, we call them greenies. Well, these are the original ones which are in the museum in the Rector's palace. There are the copies now, and they strike the bell in the full hour and half past. But the interesting thing is that they strike twice the full hour, like it's 5 o'clock 5 times, and 3 minutes later 5 times again. Well, for those who would try to say, oh, I haven't heard the bell, so that's why I'm late. No, no, no. That's why we strike twice. And then there's the Saint Blaise, the patron saint, always watching over us. And Orlando or Roland, the medieval symbol of free towns. Actually, he was a Frankish military leader who lived in the 8th century, but in the Middle Ages became the symbol of the free cities. It is being restored. In the past, it was also a pillar of shame, but today it has more let's say entertaining functions or traditional. For example, Dubrovnik Summer Festival, the flag is raised on the pillar or column of Orlando. Then we'll just have a quick peek. I couldn't take pictures, but it's not allowed. But in the Cathedral of Dubrovnik, there's the treasury with the most precious relics of Dubrovnik, namely, most importantly, the head of Saint Blaise from the 12th century. Well, he lived in the 4th, but the relic itself is from the 12th, containing a piece of his skull. Now back to the square where we were earlier with the pigeons and the market. And if these beautiful steps look familiar, that's maybe because you are a Game of Thrones fan. This is the famous Walk of Shame. These steps were built in the 1700s, just a few years after the famous Spanish steps in Rome, and it's in the same style. And they lead towards the Jesuit college and the Jesuit church. Another connection with Rome. The project for the Jesuit church in Dubrovnik was made by the same architect and a painter, Andrea Pozzo, who made the project for the Church of Jesus in Rome and painted the ceiling, the gorgeous ceiling of Saint Ignatius. Now this is the inside of the Jesuit church. But there are also other shrines. For example, if you would like to visit the Orthodox Church of Dubrovnik, built in the early 1900s, or visit the synagogue, which has services only for the most important holidays, but mainly serves as a museum, dedicated, of course, to the Jewish community in Dubrovnik that had their own street, Judioska, or the Jewish street. Unfortunately, it was a ghetto, like in many other places in Europe, but it's inside the old city, and this museum is really worth visiting. The synagogue goes back to the 1300s. It's a Sephardic synagogue, one of the oldest ones in Europe, again, 1352. And now it's about time to go for a casual walk and explore the beautiful part of Dubrovnik that is turned towards the Adriatic, towards south. Yes, these are private courtyards, but everybody can walk through these little streets, of course, respectfully and silently. People live here. And they even have these enchanting gardens where they hang their laundry, which is forbidden in the big cities, but here is a part of the local charm. What would we do without the laundry hanging on the streets? Now it's about time to go for a little refreshment and wander through the beautiful streets. This is a 10th century church of St. Stephen when Dubrovnik was still under Byzantine rule and protection. And these walls, they hide some fascinating holes. Well, Buja is literally a hole. There are Buja 1 and Buja 2. There are 2 cafes where you can go for a drink and a swim. And there's also a beautiful view of the island of Lokrum that we're going to visit a little later. So this is how it looks like from the outside. Now, wandering through the city, you may run into another museum called Rupe, another hole. Buja was like Italianized from Buko. Rupa is a Croatian word, and this museum houses the granary. The granary that had 15 of these silos where 1,500 tons of grain could have been stored. That was the staple food and extremely important for the population to have that in storage. Now, I couldn't record their video, obviously, for the questions of copyright, but I took a picture of these holes beautifully represented. It's a museum that's worthwhile visiting. It's also at Ethnographic Museum, these beautiful costumes from the hinterland. You can see the details of these lovely blouses and skirts. They're no longer worn except for the folk dance performances. Now, there are also places where you can taste Croatian olive oil. You see, it's one of the 28 Croatian products that got the European label of excellence. If you need a little refreshment, you can munch on those roasted almonds that you picked up at the market. You'll need some energy. And after that, you're ready for another museum. This is the Rector's Palace. We must mention that the government of the Republic of Dubrovnik was based on a Venetian model. And this is the palace where the rector lived for 1 month. Because the idea was that the Dubrovnik nobility, so only the nobles made part of the government, had to mind the public businesses and not their private affairs. That was their motto, and there was a great council and the minor council, and then the Senate of 45 members that was also elected for only 1 year. So there was no way that one person could become too powerful. And you can see there is a bust of a gentleman in this beautiful cloister. We'll get to him, but just before mentioning Miho Pracat, I just wanted to say that this is where the concerts usually take place, classical music, and not just during the Dubrovnik Summer Festival. This is a very popular venue for the concerts. Now, Mihaeli or Miho Pracat was an extremely wealthy gentleman from Dubrovnik who bequeathed all of his property to the city and for charity. So they built a bust, a monument to Miho Pracat. Now, inside the Rector's Palace, you can see the old furniture, beautiful pieces, and learn about how this little government functioned. And on the wall, there's a coat of arms of Dubrovnik with a clock that they say was stopped on 31st of January 1808, and that's when the French army, the General Marmont, abolished the Republic of Dubrovnik. So outside of the Rector's Palace, we come back to the main street, and then the Sponza Palace that survives the big earthquake, and it's still in a beautiful Gothic and Renaissance flourish style. And today it houses the city archive, but it was a dogana, or custom house. It was a mint as well. It has this lovely cloister, also a museum dedicated to Orlando, or Roland, the hero, and about history of a part of the history of Dubrovnik. And also there is a memorial room for the defenders of Dubrovnik. We were under siege in 91, 92, and about 300 people died, of whom about 2/3 were the brave defenders of the city. So they are commemorated in this room. There are other places in Dubrovnik where you can learn about that. There is a proper war museum on the mountain of Srđ above the city. I'll show you. And also there is a collection of photographs at the Rector's Palace, and also a small memorial home to this a horrible day, to the 6th of December 1991, when this is what we woke up to. The city looked like this, but luckily it's gotten out of this trouble, and Croatia became independent, and Dubrovnik has been restored with the big help of international community, and it's been on the list of UNESCO since 1979. And now I'm back to the Sponza Palace to show you these amazing windows. You say, what's amazing about this window? Well, many look like that. Well, if you get a closer look at these bars, they go through each other through those like rings. But looking even closer, you will see that the upper layer here on this photo, they're vertical, and in the lower one, they're horizontal. It was literally impossible to break into these, through these windows into the palazzo, because it was a mint. Let's not forget that a lot of wealth was stored in the Sponza Palace. But now let's get to the walls. The walls, look at that beautiful, beautiful city of Dubrovnik, the island of Lokrum. And again, we're going to get there. We're going to walk the wall all the way around, and we are now on the northern side. This is a beautiful view of the roofs. See how many were damaged and restored after the war, and some remained still the old ones. Maybe they also need a bit of restoration. And continuing along the wall, so I think I skipped this one. This is the northern side that culminates in this gorgeous fortress from the 15th century called Minčeta. When the cannonballs became a major threat, the towers started being of a round shape, and Minčeta is also one of the stages for the theater performances during the summer. And this is now the view of Minčeta from the west side. You could think of where we are. Looking to the left, we are at the Pile Gate, where we entered the city originally. But we will continue along the wall on the seaside. We'll get back to this area because I'd like to show you the fortress of Lovrenac as well, St. Lawrence. Just one more slide showing you how lovely and pleasant this walk on the walls is. But let's just go back a minute to the fortress of St. Lawrence to the right and Bokar to the left. This is a Pile Bay, like the Pile Gate, Pile Bay. Bokar is one of the most beautiful fortresses, 15th century as well, where you can go on some healthy kayaking. And Lovrenac, or St. Lawrence, this is our Dubrovnik Elsinore. Again, imagine Derek Jacobi, Daniel Day-Lewis, and later on also our famous actors, Rade Šerbedžija, Goran Višnjić, playing Hamlet on this amazing fortress. But today, people who come here, most of them come on a tour, Game of Thrones, many locations in Dubrovnik were used it's such a photogenic city. There's no need to work on the set too much. It's just there. Naturally, there's again Saint Blaise at the fortress in the niche, and this is where you can see above the entrance that famous inscription: "Liberty is not sold for all the gold in the world," in Latin, obviously. And talking about the Game of Thrones, there are two thrones, iron thrones. One is in the old city in this little street, and of course plenty of merchandise as well. And there is another one on the island of Lokrum, where there is also the interactive museum. Now, talking about the island, it's about time that we get there. So here we are in the old harbor. We're going to take, well, one of these two ships, the more modern one. We'll mention the other one a little later on the way back. It's a modern as well, but it's made as a model of the old Dubrovnik traditional ship called Karaka, which was the glory of the city, known as Argosy from Ragusa in England. Now we're taking this ship to leave the harbor. Those three arches are the big cafe and the restaurant today. That's where they used to repair ships. Beautiful sunny day, and the fortress of St. John, remember the Maritime Museum. While on the opposite side, on the mainland, there are the quarantine blocks where today it's like a nightclubs and also cultural events take place in Lazareti. Now we are leaving the old city, spectacular views, and Lokrum is such an enchanting place, little harbor where these little ferry ships arrive every half an hour. There's even like a little lake on the island. It's salty sea, it's connected with the Adriatic, and this is where some of my friends learned how to swim. This is so safe. There's a botanical garden since 1900, so it's really worth visiting, beautifully husbanded. And the old legend about the Benedictine monastery that was originally built in the 11th century, and this is also where Richard the Lionheart suffered the shipwreck and survived and wanted to build a church on the island, but the diplomats of Dubrovnik managed to convince him to give the contribution for the cathedral in the city. The Benedictines were expelled, made leave by the French, and the French also built a fortress at the top of the island, but the Benedictines decided that they would take revenge, so they cursed the island. They say they walked around 3 times, hooded, and with their candles turned upside down towards the earth, so they left a melted wax trail, and they said whoever takes Lokrum for his own pleasure should be cursed. Needless to say, the 3 gentlemen who brought the message from the French, one committed suicide, one drowned in the sea, one was killed by his servant, all kinds of terrible things. And famously, Maximilian from Habsburg family, so we are in the 1800s, came to the island. He loved it, and he had the passion for the gardens. He brought the peacocks and the canaries and parrots on Lokrum, and with his wife Charlotta, he spent time on the island. This is their table and the bench. You see the wider space between the table and the bench where Charlotte was sitting with her big dress. And poor Maximilian was killed in Mexico. They say later Rudolf, again, another Habsburg prince, came to the island with his wife, but later he committed a suicide with his mistress, Maria Vecera, and I can guarantee you nothing that terrible happens on the island, but we are not allowed to spend the night because it's under protection. It's a beautiful garden, and we are trying to be very respectful, but plan to spend a whole day because of the beaches and the nature. And there is a restaurant, there's a museum, there's a little bit of everything. So now back from the island, back into the harbor, but you see the ship is also coming back from its daily excursion. Again, it's a model of Caraca, and it's similar to Christopher Columbus' now ship, Santa Maria della Salute. There was even a theater performance on a ship like that some 20 years ago. And Caraca, here is the modern one, sorry. The modern one that we just saw that came back from the daily excursion, built exactly as the old one. At the peak of its glory, Dubrovnik, I'm talking about the 15th, 16th century, had about 180 ships, and most of them were these cargo ships, again called carrack or argosy. You can learn about them at the Maritime Museum. There are a lot of models to be seen. And now, after we've done all these cultural things in the monasteries and churches, you may decide to find a beach nearby. So this is a beautiful Banje beach right outside of the old city, next to the quarantine Lazareti. And you can go to some smaller beaches, just ask the locals, where should I go, where it's not that crowded, or like little discreet bays outside of the old city. This is my bay. This is the Bay of Lapad. It's obviously outside of the old city, but a beautiful beach and a little hill or mountain called Petka. A lot of hotels. This is also where you can come in the evening. There is a hotel that ran into a cave while they were building it, Hotel More. I'm talking about very recently. And here in the Bay of Lapad, there's this one of the, they say it's one of the best 5 hotel bars in the world. I haven't been, but next time that will be something to do. They're also less expensive probably, but also very charming places where you can go in the afternoon. This is already the twilight. We are not in the old city, but towards the area called Babin Cook. More beaches, more entertainment. Or you can go to fun museums. There is a museum dedicated to love stories. Quite unusual. Then there is a Red History Museum about our Yugoslavian, let's say, communist, socialist past. This is the map of ex-Yugoslavia, where you can see all the 6 republics. This museum is in the modern part of the city called Gruž, where there is the big market. It's very unbiased. It's a really fun museum, very well done, reconstructing how most of the people lived. I may have not had that kind of a bed, but for example, my mom had this kind of a radio. And a lot of things remind us of our youth, well, my generation. And especially the music, they make you listen to all the music, and there are a lot of popular pieces there for everybody, for all generations. Well, not for the 20 years old, obviously. And the produce that we use, or our moms use, vegeta is the spice that you can still find. It's still in commerce, but you can also find the recipe online to make your own. It's like dried spices, and it's one of the typical products of ex-Yugoslavia. And now, ladies, I promised I'd mention the jewelry. There is a whole street with a lot of beautiful shops where these traditional bits and pieces are made. These like bells, of which each one is from a different village with a different meaning. And some are silver, gold, or it doesn't have to be expensive, but they are gorgeous. The earrings as well, typical earrings from, again, different parts of the hinterland and Dubrovnik itself, so plenty to indulge. For gentlemen, I could suggest a tie, because croata or cravata, they say was invented by Croatians. So there's something for you as well, gentlemen. Now, what to do for fun, as if we haven't had fun at all. I'll tell you later where I found this donkey. But you can go outside of Dubrovnik, you can go to the islands. This is a beautiful, beautiful Šipan island that was also part of the Republic of Dubrovnik. This is the kind of atmosphere you can expect on these small islands. You can go to Ston, which is 40 minutes drive, half an hour drive from Dubrovnik. These are the walls. It's like a mini Dubrovnik. The walls built between the 14th and the 15th century to defend the salt pans of the city. The fortifications are in amazing shape. The salt pans are, they say, the oldest still functioning in Europe since the ancient Roman times. Great quality salt without additives. And you can find, in this particular restaurant, you can find even the so-called fleur de sole. I'm not sure about my French pronunciation, but the flour of salt, which is the salt that accumulates on the sea surface, and it has more minerals than the regular normal salt. And oysters. Oysters are another Croatian product or type of food that just recently got its European label of excellence. Amazing oysters from Ston, from this area, officially Malostonska kamenica. That's quite difficult to pronounce and memorize, but anyway, the oysters from Ston. So oyster tasting, they cost less, of course, at Ston. It costs a little more in the old city because of the transportation. I don't know about all that aphrodisiac stuff, but it certainly makes me smile to see oysters and just eat them fresh like that. These were a bit older. They were like 5 or 10 years, I can't remember, but they were delicious. They're more like steaks than oysters. And this is now the beginning from Ston. You can continue towards the peninsula of Pelješac, where there are amazing wineries. The most famous wine is Dingač. I would like to spend hours here, but we have a little time left. You can Google Croatian wines. They're excellent wines. It's like a big thing now. Not just Dingač is the most famous red one, and my favorite, as you can tell. So now that you've done all that, at the end of the day, have someone make some palatine for you. They're just the crepes, but the crepes that are our comfort food because our moms used to make them. And when we smell crepes, or palatine, we are really happy. Some restaurants have them, and the local people make them all the time with chocolate, with marmalade, with walnuts, different kinds. So now your afternoon is nearing the end. You go back to your, well, hotel, apartment, your soba, which is the room. Take a shower, beautify yourself, and go chase the evening. So we are back to Banja Beach, which becomes a nightclub, and beautiful sunsets, and you can continue back to the little streets for a nice romantic dinner, or you can leave the old city and take a cable car to go to the mountain of Srđ for this absolutely stunning view of the city. See, there's music and a beautiful restaurant. You have to make reservations way ahead. It's excellent. There's also a war history museum in the fortress, and of course you can also just come for the view, gorgeous view of the city. Go back to the old harbor for a stroll, chase the moon around the walls. This is the fortress of St. John, and this is usually a bit more crowded, but this is a lovely cafe, Porporella, where we all love to come later in the evening when we are in the old city. See the quarantine. In the continuation, there are a couple of old hotels, Excelsior, Argentina, but old meaning good traditional hotels, actually the most famous ones. And when everybody goes to sleep, you can go back to the main street and take some of these amazing photos of, well, we will keep repeating the most beautiful street in the world, at least for us. Stradun, Dubrovnik, Croatia. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have enjoyed it. Tonight was, again, as a returning to my first love, where I was a guide in the 80s, way back in the 80s. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm here for any questions or anything